Okay, well, official good afternoon, everyone. It's just gone 3 o'clock, so I'm going to start anyway, and I apologise for anyone that ends up joining us. Obviously, they won't hear this if they're only just joining us. So my name's Caroline Cooper, and this afternoon's webinar is how to get your customers spending more and thanking you for it. Just to go through a couple of domestics before we kick off, you'll see that there is a little panel off to the right which looks something like this, and if you would like to ask a question, there is a question section sort of halfway down on the right, and if I ask a yes/no question, if you can just raise your hand accordingly in response to that. And I would like you to get involved this afternoon when I ask questions, because it's a little bit disconcerting for me because I'm just talking to a screen, which is always a little bit off-putting. So it's always good to know that everyone can still hear me and that you're still finding things useful and interesting. So we've only got 60 minutes or so this afternoon. Just a reminder of what we're going to be covering this afternoon. We're going to be looking at the value of value and why discounting isn't necessarily the answer, and I'm not dismissing discounting altogether, but we'll just look at why sometimes it doesn't work as effectively as it should do. How to spot the easy opportunities that your customers will love, 5 ways to engage your team to willingly offer more, and how to present additional items without you having to be pushy. So in other words, things that your customers are going to actually want. So I'm going to just start off with a little bit about me first of all. For those of you who don't know me, Caroline Cooper, I've had 28 years experience in hospitality. Most of those, well I say most of those, until the last 8 years were spent in the corporate world, and my last full-time job was head of training, where I had responsibility, amongst other things, for customer service and for increasing sales within a contract catering environment. And I think everybody thinks that contract catering is quite an easy hit in terms of sales, because potentially you do have a captive audience. And that was probably the case 15 or 20 years ago, but definitely is not the case now, because if you think about what's happening in the high street, and there is just so much competition out in the high street, and the downside of that is that from a client's perspective, that's not necessarily good news, that people are then tempted to go and leave the building at lunchtime. The whole idea generally with contract catering, certainly within the B&I sector, business and industry sector, is that the client wants to not only provide a benefit for their employees, but also to keep those employees on site, so that they're not having a lot of downtime with people sort of getting back late after lunch and so on. So obviously it was in the client's interest to keep people on site, but also obviously from a contractor's point of view as well. So that made up a big part of what we were involved in. Since leaving the corporate world, I have been focusing on management development and also focusing on marketing. I wrote the Hotel Success Handbook 3 years ago, and I now frequently speak at events on customer experience and write articles both for print and online journals and magazines. So just a cross-section of those there on the screen. And in terms of where this fits in with everything else that I do, I believe that there are 7 key ingredients to giving a fantastic service for customers. The first of those is to love your customers, and we see it so often. We start doing business with someone and we really do feel that there's no relationship whatsoever, there's no connection at all with their customers, and it's almost like the customers are a complete interruption to that person's day or to their work. So for me, it's very important that that love and that attention for customers comes through. That then leads into outstanding experiences, and this is looking at the entire customer journey. So from the point of view of finding out about you, finding out information, making inquiries, whether that's online or through social media or phoning somewhere, that whole experience is a good one, and engaging with people early on. It's also about encouraging people to say yes to more, and that's really what we're going to be focusing on predominantly today, is thinking about how do we get customers saying yes to offering them more things. It's about showing appreciation for our customers, so saying thank you, showing that you do appreciate their customers so that customers feel valued. It's also about thinking about the leveraging the lifetime value, and I guess a lot of that overlaps a little bit with saying yes to more. Some of the businesses who are listening today, you will have customers who will probably spend, an amount with you on any one particular transaction, but there will be an understanding that they will continue to do business with you over a period of time. So those two very much link in with one another. It's also about having a team that you can trust. And a lot of what we are going to be covering this afternoon is about having that trusted team and making sure that they also are in a position that they can comfortably encourage your customers to spend more with you, and that doesn't become something that's uncomfortable for them. And finally, it's about you and how you come over. And of course, a lot of what we're talking about today how you are with your customers will have an impact on that, because if people don't like you, they're not likely to spend very much with you. Now, hopefully that would never be the case, but what type of an ambassador are we, and how good an example do we set to our team? So what we're going to be homing in on today is this yes to more and having your trusted team, and those two. Now, we've only got 60 minutes this afternoon, so I'm going to be going at some points at quite a pace. And for those of you who'd like to learn more about this, I am going to be talking a little bit later on about a way of finding out a little bit more. So let's just remind ourselves about the agenda. So we're going to be talking about the value of value. We're going to be looking at how to spot those easy opportunities. And then I've actually just swapped things around slightly from what was advertised. I'm going to be looking at additional items first, and then we're going to finish off with the 5 ways to engage your team. Now, before we do any of that, let's think about, well, why would we want to get people to be spending more with us in the first place? Because part of us thinks that, it makes us feel really uncomfortable, and it can make the customer or the client feel uncomfortable. And I know that we've all experienced it, haven't we, when we've walked into a shop, and the minute you walk in, the shop assistant pounces on you and they say, "Can I help you?" And you go, "Oh, no, it's okay, I'm just looking, thank you." And we suddenly feel a little bit pressurized. And it puts the business on a little bit of a back foot, because they've now almost sort of been dismissed. And it puts us as the customer on a bit of a back foot, because we feel, it just feels that little bit awkward. So how do you do that without it feeling pushy? And the trouble is that if we don't do that, if we think about the reasons that we're doing this, don't worry about the batteries, I'll explain about the batteries in a moment. First of all, we will have spent an awful lot of money, potentially, whether it's through whatever form of marketing, to get people in through the door in the first place, to pick up the phone to make an appointment with us, or to start doing business with us. That will have a cost. So the more a customer spends with you, then the more that's actually going to improve your return on investment of actually getting that new business in the first place. And that, although there will be some cost of servicing those extra items, obviously there's going to be so if, let's say, for sake of argument, you are a restaurant and you now get somebody to buy a dessert and they didn't have that dessert in the first place, yes, there's going to be a cost associated with that dessert, but your margins proportionately will go up. So you're getting a better return on your investment. The second reason is that you are then in a better position to reinvest. And I don't mean this in terms of, from a greed point of view, but what you're able to do is to reinvest for the customer's benefit. So this is definitely a knock-on benefit for the customer. And you're then able to add value. I mean, let's take, for example, a high street shop. Who wants to go into, let's say you've been going to the same place for donkey's years, but bit by bit it gets that little bit shabbier, a little bit more tired, and ultimately, we've seen it with some of the places in the high street. They just get shabbier and shabbier, it actually impacts the whole experience that we have, and we stop wanting to do business with them because it doesn't feel quite right. Who equally might want to go to a dentist who's not in a position to reinvest in the latest equipment, or a doctor or a hospital where they don't have money to invest in the right equipment, or who would want to go to, let's say, a marketer who wasn't completely up to date with the latest trends. So by increasing the additional sales, it allows us more than to reinvest in the business. And then the third reason is it actually helps to complete the experience for the customer. And this is where the batteries come in. I always think of the example. Let's say that you've got small children and you have bought your 3-year-old this fantastic toy that they've been nagging you about, and you get it home and they're all excited about getting their new toy out, and then you read those words, batteries not included, and you don't have the batteries. And the thing is, if nobody's told us or suggested to us that we buy the batteries, then there's every chance that we're going to forget. Or you buy a new piece of a new bit of computer kit, but you're not told about the software that you need for it to run effectively. Or you, going back to the restaurant example, you order a main course and the waiter or waitress doesn't suggest that you might want a side order of vegetables, or that you're not offered the wine list, or you're not offered coffee or brandy or a digestive at the end of your meal. All of those things add to the experience. Now with the batteries, it's a little bit clearer cut that you're going to need those. With the other ones, it all just enhances the experience. Another example might be you're buying a gift or some beautiful flowers as a gift for a friend. The offer of something like gift wrap, a little gift card, some ribbon, any of those things, they're all additional sales, but they're all part of completing that whole experience that we've had when we've made that purchase. So this is why we'd want to do it, and I would say that those reasons outweigh that feeling of being pushy. Of course, the key is making sure that you do it in such a way that it doesn't come across as being pushy. So that's what we're going to look at. And just excuse me, have a sip of water. Now, in order to do this, not only do we need the skills to do it in a way that's not pushy, but there is a certain amount of knowledge that we need as well. And there are 3 things that we need to know in order to do this effectively. The first thing is that we really need to understand our customers. We need to know what's important to them. We need to know what they're going to value, because if we go back to that experience that we've just mentioned, if we are trying to introduce them to something that they don't value, then it is going to feel like we're being pushy. So if we go back to the flowers example, if we just want something that's really cheap and cheerful, and we don't value all the fancy bits, the gift wrap, all the rest of it, then probably we're going to go, oh, no, I don't need any of that, thank you very much. But if it is, we've bought a beautiful, I love tulips, I absolutely adore tulips, and if I go in and buy a nice bunch of tulips, but particularly if I wanted to give them as a gift for somebody, if I then get offered that gift wrap or something beautiful to wrap it in and a nice little card, then that for me will add to the experience. But I will buy sometimes flowers for me, and I want the cheap and cheerful, and other times I want something that's a little bit special. So with the customers, it's also knowing about the circumstances, and sadly for us, customers are a little bit like chameleons depending on the situation that they're in. So we need to recognise that does change. But we also need to know what are the trends, what are the likes and dislikes, what are the things that are important to them. All of those things will impact how successful we are about introducing them to additional sales. We need to know the products and services that we have on offer. Now that might be easy for us, but not quite so easy for our team. We probably know our products and services inside out. Having said that, I do know some businesses where it's very hesitant about what it is that they're actually offering. And I have to confess that I had somebody saying to me fairly recently, somebody that I've known for quite a while, and they said, Caroline, I'm still a little bit confused about exactly what it is that you offer. Now, that's a good learn for me. That was a bit of a wake-up call, but I'm not necessarily always quite as clear-cut as I need to be. So if you don't understand it and your team don't understand it, then you can't expect your customers or your clients to understand it either. So obviously you need to know the features, but anyone that's ever tried to sell anything also will know you need to know what the benefits are from the customer's perspective. You need to know things like pricing. You need to know what the difference is between, let's say, for example, I do a lot of work with hotels. So I need to know, people then need to know the difference between, what's the distinction between a standard room and a superior room. Well, if you don't know that, then you're not going to get somebody to upgrade to a superior room. Simple as that. So you need to know all of the comparisons as well. And then last but by no means least, and probably most critical at this point, is you need to know your numbers. So you need to know what your margins are, because when we get on to talking about discounting, if you don't know what your margin is, then let's say that your margin is 30%. So for every £100 that the customer pays net of VAT, of course, you've got to factor that in, then £30 of that is profit. So this is where, for example, with discounting, where discounting just doesn't work, because if you suddenly discount something by 50%, that's not 50% of your profit that's gone, that's 50% of your income. And actually that's now cost you, effectively, 20 quid. And you can't sustain a business on doing that. And so your numbers, knowing your numbers and knowing what your leeway is. Now, if you know that you can then recoup that £20 plus more with additional sales and through upselling once you've got somebody through the door with that discounting, then that's fine. But you can't do that unless you know your numbers. You need to know where your gaps are. You need to know the impact on your bottom line. You need to understand the impact on your bottom line, for example, that if you had a 2% increase in sales, what impact would that have? If you had a 2% decrease in sales, what impact that would have, or 5% or 10%. And unless you have got some mechanism to do that, you are going to struggle when it comes to, for example, discounting or knowing what you can bundle together to put things together that will actually be an incentive for your customers to buy more. So I'd just like to do a little bit of a poll here. I would like to ask you, how many of you could hand on heart say that you would know that your number one product or service that you sell, first of all, what your margin is on that product compared with your cost and what your profit margin is? Just raise your hands if you would hand on heart say that you know that information. Interesting. Not many of you. So that may be something that you want to go away and have a look at. The other thing that is relevant of what we've covered so far is what your cost of acquisition is. So knowing what it's costing you in the first place to get a customer through the door. So if, for example, if you spend on average £1,000 a month on your marketing and your average sales are £3,000, then you'll know then, well, in fact, let's say that and of the £3,000, that's 100 customers, so that's 30 customers. If you spent £1,000 on bringing those people in, then you can then work out your cost of acquisition. So the cost of acquisition for those, 100 customers is £10 a customer. So you've got to factor that in. So, hand on heart, who actually knows specifically what their cost of acquisition is? Just raise your hand if you can say, yes, definitely, you know what your cost of acquisition is for each of your customers. Okay, again, only 20% of you. Okay, so again, that's something that you might want to have a little look at. So let's think then about the value of value. Let me ask you a question here. You see something for, in fact, let me just go back to a discussion that I was having with somebody this morning. We were talking about insurance and how that you might have a sort of norm in terms of what you might expect to pay for a particular type of insurance, so whether that's professional indemnity or car insurance or travel insurance, whatever. And then you see somebody that is offering premiums that are 50% below the sort of normal market price. Wouldn't you get a little bit suspicious? And you know, that value is, oh, I could get it for cheaper, but actually, well, what am I losing out by not having that? So sometimes the value of value is actually the little extras that you're going to be getting. Let me put this in another context. Let's say that you see, I'm going to use the same example that this idea was introduced to me by a guy called Peter Thompson, who I love his stuff. He talks about you see a tray for sale in, let's say, Harrods, and you absolutely love this tray. You think, oh yeah, I've got to have it. So how much might you be prepared to pay for that tray if you saw it in Harrods? So let's say, for example, that you'd happily pay, you think, oh yeah, actually I've seen it in there, I would pay £70 for that tray. Now let's imagine that you see the same tray for sale in Debenhams. Do you now put the same value on the tray in Debenhams? Would you still pay £75 for it? Or would you pay less? Just raise your hands if you think now you'd probably pay less for that tray seeing it in Debenhams than you would if you saw it in Harrods. Okay, so a lot of you would pay less if you saw it in Debenhams. So let's now imagine that you see exactly the same tray at a car boot sale. What now? Now the thing is that value is, it's a bit like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder. Different people will put different values on different things. But a lot of that value is what goes around. It's not necessarily just the product itself. It's all the sort of periphery things that go around it, part of which will be the service that you get, part of which will be the environment in which you're buying it, part of it will just be a perception of, oh, if I buy it in Harrods, it must be good quality. If I buy it at a car boot sale, I'm not really quite sure. So quite often people will pay more or less for exactly the same item. Another example is that when next time you go on holiday, I think the last time you went on holiday and you got onto a jumbo jet, if you think about the number of people who went up those steps and they turned left to go into first class. Now, are they going to get to the destination any quicker? No. Are they going to get to a better destination? No, they're not. So why would people spend 3, 5, 10 times as much? Because they believe that they're getting value. It could be that they're going to be able to sleep on the plane, it could be the quality of the food, it could be it's less cramped, all sorts of reasons. Same reason that some people will shop in Waitrose and M&S rather than going into Lidl. So there definitely is a place for that adding value. And this is where we make the sort of contrast with discounts, because yes, you can offer discounts, but it comes back to that, well, okay, well, so what's wrong with it? If we discount too much, people then get suspicious. Obviously, it erodes your margin. So coming back to the previous slide, you've got to know your numbers and know at which point you are going to be breaking even. How many of something do you have to sell before you break even? And what else do I need to sell at normal price or full price to upsell in order to recoup any particular losses that I've got? But the other problem with discounts is it actually, some might argue it actually attracts the wrong type of people. So are they your ideal customer? Are they just the bargain hunters who will never buy anymore? So they're never going to, if we're talking about a meal, they're never going to buy a nice bottle of wine. They're never going to have a dessert. They're never going to come back again when they need to pay full price. And does it actually educate your customers to be expecting more from you for less? Which is actually the complete opposite of what we want what this webinar is all about. It's about getting people to spend more, not about spending less. So we need to approach discounts very, very carefully. And I'm not saying never ever discount, but you need to know your numbers and you need to have a strategy in place to recoup any potential loss that you otherwise will be making. So how do we identify where we can do that? So let's think about those easy opportunities that we have to actually get that income up. Well, the first of those is, for goodness sake, listen to your customers. Listen and observe. What is it that they want? What is it that they're buying from your competitors? What is it that they ask us for? Now, we might not always be able to oblige, but rather than saying no, what else could we offer them that might be a reasonable substitute? You know, if it's in the moment and they're there and they are already in your business, what else could we give them that would prevent them going elsewhere? Because they've already come to you, they're already effectively a captive audience. So listen to what they're asking for, and if we can't do it now, can we do it subsequently or offer them something else? Think about solving their problems. What are the things where there is a gap? Now, for example, I was out this morning and it started to rain, surprise, surprise. So, you know, you're having unseasonal weather and you're in an environment where actually by not having the right, my brother always says there's no such thing as bad weather, there's only bad clothing or inappropriate clothing. He's a geologist, spends loads of time out in the open. But if let's say we have a hotel and people's experience is going to be marred by not having the right clothing, well, is there an opportunity there for us to be, you know, having umbrellas, for having the right clothing? Or if we can't do it, that we have some kind of a joint venture partnership with somewhere that provides outdoor clothing, just as an example. If I'm a travel agent and we know that people are going to be wanting insurance, they're going to be wanting dog sitters while they're away, they are going to be wanting to buy luggage, all of those things are solving people's problems, which if that's your business, you could be doing something to help solve those, which really brings us on to things that are complementary. What are complementary services or offers that provide you with an opportunity for selling more? So is there a bolt-on to what you already provide? So we talked earlier about gift wrapping for flowers. If you provide weddings, if you're a venue and you provide weddings, is there an opportunity here for you to be providing complementary services such as arranging with a florist, arranging the flowers? Is there an opportunity for complementary services in terms of what happens after the event with, you know, think about, you know, from a parent's point of view, it's quite a stressful time for them, you know, especially if it's their daughter getting ready for their wedding. Is there something you can then be doing that complements that for the parents after the event, once couples gone off on their honeymoon and it's all over? And, you know, without knowing all of your individual industries, there's a whole host, there's a whole raft of things that you could be thinking about which are complementary. And one of the things that I love, it's something called the magic matrix. So once you have identified the other things that you could be offering that complement your core business, is then looking at all of your customers and who is already buying what from you and making sure, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here because this is point number 5, but it's then informing your customers as well. Offering your customers choice. If you only have one thing, and sometimes, yeah, that might be your unique selling point, your unique selling proposition is you only have one thing and that's what you get known for, which is fine. But if you do have a range of things, make sure that there's enough contrast that it does genuinely give people something to choose from, that there's enough difference. Let's, again, I'm just going to take an example here. I'm going to come back to restaurants. Sorry, I keep falling back on restaurants as examples. Let's say, for example, that your dessert menu, that everything on your dessert menu has chocolate in it. Well, if you don't like chocolate, you're a bit stuffed. So making sure there is enough contrast there for your customers. And allowing that little bit of flexibility. So, for example, can I have the almond tart but without the chocolate sauce, please. Well, is that a big deal to say, yes, by all means you can have that? Because if that makes a difference between selling that dessert and not selling that dessert, it would be daft not to do that. What would make it even better, is, of course, is to say, would you like some other sauce with it to compensate? And then finally, this is all very well, but if our customers don't know what the options are and what's available, then it still doesn't open the door for them to buy. So we need to make sure that we let customers know what we've got available. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that in just a moment. So those are 5 easy ways to spot opportunities. Listen to what your customers are saying, look ahead, anticipate, solve their problems, look at things that complement what you're already offering, give them choice so that they do feel like they've had a choice, and let people know exactly what is available. Incidentally, for those of you who have joined since the start of the webinar, please do feel free to post any questions in the little question box, which is partway down on the right hand side in your little control panel. Okay, so the next stage is then to think about, we said that we were going to look at presenting additional items but in a non-pushy way. So how do we do that? Well, certainly it's going to be easier if you've already spotted those opportunities above, because everything that we've covered in those opportunities are all things that are going to appeal to our target audience. But, as we said earlier, there are some times when they'll appeal and sometimes when they won't be interested. So we need to be very receptive to that. But the first thing we can do, and this links in with informing our customers, is engage with them early on. Make sure that we're getting a great first impression, but use that matrix that we talked about, recognize when people don't know what we have on offer. And even things like your website, the more that you tell people about what's on offer, what's available, then the more they're going to be a little bit prepared for when they come and do business with you. Giving them an indication of what things, what their investment might be, or if let's say it's from an experience, giving people a feel for what the average spend might be. A lot of restaurants now are doing that, is to give people an indication of the average spend per head, so that people know what to expect, so that they're then not penny pinching when they get to you thinking, oh, menu's far more expensive than I thought it was going to be. So if you can pre-educate people about what's on offer and an average spend, then they're going to be far more receptive when they actually come to you. Then we need to be building that sense of anticipation. Now, part of this is to do with timing. Again, I'm going to come back to, I've got a thing about desserts today. Sorry about this. I hope I'm not making people feel hungry. You think in a restaurant with desserts. I mean, first of all, for me, I like to know, when I look at a menu, I like to know what the desserts are, because if I know that there is something really, really scrummy on the menu for dessert, I'll make flipping sure that I'm going to leave some space for it, so that I'm then not faced with a dessert menu and I'm already too full and say, oh no, I can't, no thanks, too full up. But then this brings in timing, because again, with the dessert menu, if you go up to somebody, the waiter or waitress comes up to you too soon after, just put your knife and fork down from your main course, you're likely to say, oh no, I'm sorry, we're too full. I think we'll just go straight on to coffee, thank you. Or they leave it too long and you've gone off the idea. So timing is very important, and that's the same with any business. You're not going to get everybody all the time. Somebody might not buy from you today, but they might buy tomorrow, and we need to recognize that just because you've asked somebody once about something, it doesn't mean to say that they won't be interested tomorrow, because what you've actually done is you've sown the seed for that. So you've pre-educated people, you've now started to build that little sense of anticipation. You can also build anticipation, which is the same way with the menu does, letting you know what the desserts are when you're actually still ordering your starters. But you can build a little bit of anticipation by letting people know what's coming. So if you're going to be bringing on something that's new for the new season, so for your summer season or your autumn season or for Christmas, then you can let people know about what's coming soon. Watch this space. Build that little bit of anticipation, those little teasers, I was actually on a webinar earlier today, and they were talking about they were actually talking about the length of videos, and they were saying they need to be skirt length, and that they are long enough to cover everything that it should, but short enough just to give that little bit of a tease. And I don't mean to be sexist, but you know that what I mean here is just that little bit of a teaser for things can just build that anticipation. So do that as much as possible, because then you'll get people hungry and looking out for what you have to offer. And as part of that, and once you then have whatever it is for offer, you then need to be creating that desire. Now, there are a number of things that can create that desire. Details really do sell. So the more you can describe something, the better, but not in a bland, oh, it's a white chocolate dessert. That doesn't tell you anything. Oh, it's a really streamy, rich, dark chocolate with a really crispy base and a beautifully smooth, warm sauce over the top. I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go along, but you get the sense of it, is that what you want to be doing is playing on people's emotions. Sometimes you'll be pulling at heartstrings, you know, and what they're going to be losing. If you think about some of the things that were building up to Mother's Day, you know, how and how some charities work, they talk about what you're not going to get if you don't put your hand in your pocket. You need to be creating sometimes also create desire is something that is unique, it's different, you're going to stand out, it's going to be, nobody else has got this. You know, Apple were very good at doing that, creating a sense of urgency, so you're going to miss it if you don't do it now. Also a sense of consistency, so customers know, yeah, we know it's always good here, so we know that we're not going to be disappointed. Another great way to create desire, and also this could also be in terms of anticipation, is giving people little samples, a little bit of a try before you buy. And I don't know if you've heard of the law of reciprocity, where if you give somebody something for nothing, there is that little bit of attachment, and they think that, oh, actually, well, they have given me that for free, and the conversion then is a lot higher as a result of that. So, you know, give people little tasters, little samples. Great way. Takes the risk out of things as well. It's also like a guarantee that, you know, if you're not sure you're going to like something, then they can have a little taster. So depending on your type of business, obviously if it's something like a restaurant, then that's really easy. If it's let's say you have a venue and you want people to try something out, is to come and do a little sample, have a meeting there. If you have got a product that people can try it for a week at home just to test it out, see how they like it, and then if they don't like it, they can bring it back. You know, there are lots of ways that you can give people samples. So that's all about helping to create that desire. So you're not being pushy. You're getting them to come to you. And then the final one in this section is pairing and contrasting. Now, I already mentioned earlier on about having things that complement one another. So letting people know how something will complement something that you already have, and it's a logical add-on to what they already have. So pairing things together or bundling things. You know, if you think about a weekend break, you've got lots of things bundled in there. You only have to go into somewhere like Boots or Smith's at lunchtime, and they'll have their little bundled offers. So that's a great way of pairing things so that people spend more. But it also means, you know, think about your layout as well in terms of pairing, is that you might not necessarily bundle something, but position things together on your price list or where you promote your products, is that if there is something that's a logical add-on, you know, Amazon are fantastic at this, that when you look at something, they go, people who have bought this product have also bought this. So what do? You are intrigued, of course. So there's that little bit of curiosity. You go and have a look. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that you will always buy that thing, but at least it's got you thinking about it. And then the opposite of that is the contrasting. So let's take, for example, a wine menu and you see on the wine, if everything is around the same price, you're not really quite sure. You might think it's all expensive. But if you have, you've got a number of higher price wines, and then you have some mid-price wines, and then you have something that's around, I don't know, for sake of argument, £12 a bottle, compared with £30 a bottle or £60 a bottle. Suddenly, the £12 a bottle seems like great value, because what you're doing is you're contrasting it with the higher price items. So don't be afraid in your pricing to have some higher pricings, because although people won't necessarily always go for the best, the biggest, what they will be doing is that they'll be comparing good and better with the best, and suddenly better seems like great value because they've seen what the best costs, and then they'll go, potentially you're going to get them going for better rather than just good or average or the normal thing. So that's a way of using contrast, is that you're contrasting, you're getting people to contrast the price of the product against something else. And of course that all comes into coming back to giving people choice. Now the one thing I say about choice is don't give people too much choice. I was reading a book called Chip and Dan Heath, Switch it's called, and it's about how to change things. So slightly different context, but they did some testing with tasters of jam, and they had, it was a gourmet food store, and one day they had tables of 6 different types of jam, and another day they had tables with a table with 24 different types of jam. Now on the day that they'd had the 24 jam display, they got more customers tasting. But the shoppers who only saw 6 jams on display bought 10. They were 10 times more likely to buy a jar of jam than those that had seen 24. So the message is clear there. Too much confuses people. So give people a limited choice so that they feel like they have had a choice, but not so much that it confuses them. So, yep, pairing, contrasting, but limit the choice. Okay, so those are 4 ways that we can use the upselling process in such a way it's not going to feel pushy. So pre-educate your customers, build that little bit of anticipation beforehand, create that desire, and then pair and contrast different items that you have, different products. So finally, let's look at your team and how they contribute to all of this, because you can't be there 24/7. You've got to involve your team with this. So we're going to look at 5 ways that we can do this. So first of all, think about what behaviours are you looking for from your team. So, what for you constitutes good practice? How will you know when they're doing a good job in terms of selling more to your customers? And of course it helps if you recruit people who have got the nous and the wherewithal to do that. But, if you're starting from your existing team, what are the phrases that you want them to be using? What's the sort of language that you want them to be using? Bearing in mind earlier that we said about the products, the more detail you can give, the better, and the more you can play on people's emotions, the better it's going to be. So look to quantify the behaviours that you'll be looking for. Not just you're going to sell more, but what are they actually going to do? What are they going to be saying? What are they going to be doing with customers to encourage them to be spending more? Then they need the knowledge, and we've talked a lot about the product knowledge. You cannot sell something if you don't know what it is, and I gave the example earlier of a standard room versus a premium room in a hotel. No customer is going to upgrade to a premium room if they can't see any distinction in how it's better. Coming back to a hotel, how can somebody on reception encourage somebody to buy a spa package if they haven't got a clue what's included in the spa package? And the best way for them to find out what it is to go and experience it for themselves. Because if they don't experience it, how are they going to play on those emotions? How are they going to use those emotions to engage the customer? So the more first-hand experience that your team have, the easier it's going to be for them to describe things and to tap into those emotions. Just as an example, I was out for dinner with a friend the other night, and there was something on the menu that I didn't recognise what it is. And this is one of our local pubs. They have a nice restaurant attached to it. I didn't recognise something on the menu, so I asked the guy about this dish on the menu, and he said, and it was I don't know. And I said, well, what does it look like? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, just describe how it looks. He said, I've never seen it. So not only has this poor guy never tasted it, he'd never even seen the dish. Well, needless to say, I didn't have that dish. So, I mean, in that particular case, they hadn't lost a sale because it was a main course dish. I was going to have a main course dish, but I think I actually went for one that wasn't as expensive. So maybe there was a loss there. People need to have the authority. So what do I mean by this? Well, part of it is actually just having that leeway to go and chat to customers. We said earlier about how important it is to get to know your customers, to listen to your customers. So this is part of the process. Your team need that opportunity to build rapport with your customers. So rather than it being frowned upon that they're sort of taking time out to have a bit of banter with customers, that's part of their job. If they have a responsibility to sell, they need to be able to build that relationship. It's about cutting red tape, and not like, oh, system won't allow it. Computer says no. That is just, it kills your sales. People have got to have the authority to make decisions. And I know some places that have what is effectively a wow budget. And if you see an opportunity, if you see that something has maybe started to go wrong, that they have X amount that they can actually put towards correcting the situation. But it works exactly the same way when you're wanting to upsell something, because if they know how much leeway they've got, if they know what the margin is on something, and they can see that a customer maybe just needs that little bit of a push, they know how far they can go in order to make that sale. So give people that authority. What's the leeway that your team have to use their own initiative, rather than having to go and say, oh, I don't have the authority to do that, and having to run to you or a manager. Of course, that then leads into them having the confidence. And we all know that with the best will in the world, we can train people in a classroom about what to do, but when they actually are faced with a customer, it doesn't necessarily all come out exactly as we would want or they would expect. And of course, that then means that they then lose confidence. So it does necessitate you giving feedback on coaching people and tapping into where they are, where they've got skills. So if somebody is very good at describing something in a particular product, then use them for that. Not everybody's going to know about everything that you sell. So position that, or it's horses for courses really. If you've got something that's really good at selling or describing a particular product, use them for that. And also it's about reinforcing good practice. So when you've seen somebody doing something, or you've recognised when somebody has actually done really well in increasing the sales, then make sure that they get rewarded and that you're using that to reinforce that good practice, which then really leads into that recognition. And if people know what constitutes, comes back to the behaviours, if they know what constitutes good in your eyes and the customer's eyes, then they're going to do more of it. And this is the way to get your team engaged with upselling, rather than it being a real chore or them feeling really, really pushy. But I'd go back to number 4, that confidence thing, that practice, that will then make them feel that little bit better. And coming back to the building the relationship with the customer, if we think back to the earlier example of going into a shop and you get pounced upon the minute you walk in, of course that's not the behaviour that you want to endorse. So that feedback, it needs to be picking up on when people are being pushy and how to overcome that. So those are 5 ways, and I know that I ran through those quite quickly, but these are things which that they take time to develop. Recruiting the right people in the first place, letting people know what's expected, and it takes time for people to build up that knowledge, and the more that people can experience things themselves, the better. So do allow people to go and look at what happens in other departments, involve them in terms of what a customer's asking for, because they've got the knowledge as well, that first-hand knowledge of what customers want. Now, in relation to all of these 5 ways, we've just sort of skimmed the surface, as we have with a lot of the content from today. I did say at the outset that I'll talk about how you can get a little bit more information, and what I'm currently doing is that I'm offering some taster sessions for my training, or half-day training sessions, taster sessions, for people to get a real feel, because I know it's going to be a little bit of a gamble bringing in somebody who you've not seen trained before and effectively letting them loose on your team and not really quite knowing what to expect. So if that is something that is of interest to you and you would like to speak to me about that, I don't have a page up with any of this on, because what I really like to do is just talk people through what that involves. So either give me a call, obviously not just at the moment because I'm speaking on this call, on 07887 540 914 is generally the best number to get me on, or just email me at caroline@naturallyloyal.com. So that's the same email address as the invitation from the webinar came from, and I think that everybody on this call will have that. All the emails that you get from me will come from that address anyway. So that's their half-day taster sessions, and I can just tell you a little bit more about how those work and what's included. So would love to hear from you about those if that's something that's of interest to you, and that's obviously for your team and for you to get a bit of exposure to how I work. Okay, so let's just sum up. And then we'll open up for any questions. So the objective for today was to identify the value of value and why discounting isn't the answer, how to spot the easy opportunities that your customers will love, 5 ways to engage your team to willingly offer more, and how to present additional items without you having to be pushy, or without your team having to be pushy. So if we just remind ourselves of some of the points here. So in terms of value, we all know that people put a different perception on what's the value. People are prepared to spend that little bit more if they see it as value. And discounting actually does completely the opposite, because it devalues what you've got. We talked about spotting the easy opportunities that started off with listening and observing what your customers are asking for, what else they're buying elsewhere. We talked about anticipating the sort of problems, or the solving your customers' problems, so that you're offering them something that, and sometimes that's actually something we didn't mention at the time, and sometimes that we're anticipating a problem that they haven't yet even recognised that they have. A bit like the gift wrap for the flowers, oh, I hadn't even thought about that. So you're just prompting them. You're offering things that are complementary to what you're already offering. You are giving people choice, but as we said subsequently, limiting that to 3, 4, 5, maximum 6 choices, because people just get confused if they have too much choice. And informing people of what's available. We talked about engaging your team. So we talked about the 5 ways that we can engage your team. So that was to talk about the behaviours. What are the behaviours that you're looking for? Giving them the knowledge that they need, so the product knowledge, knowledge of your products, knowledge of your customers. Giving them the authority and cutting all that red tape, letting them know what leeway they have, building their confidence, so that when the time comes, that they don't feel that they're on the back foot with an awkward customer, that they don't feel that they're being pushy, because they're confident with what they're saying, and giving them the recognition when they're doing a great job. And then we talked about the additional items. So we talked about 4 areas there. We talked about pre-educating your customers, we talked about building that anticipation, we talked about creating that desire, and we talked about pairing items and contrasting your items so that they stand out. So I'm going to open up the line for any questions, or open up if you'd like to just initially raise your hand if you have a question, and then I can open up the line for you if you're happy to speak online, or if you're not, then by all means just write your question in the question box if you're feeling a little bit shy this afternoon. So do we have any questions at all? Nobody got any questions? Are you all just being a little bit shy? Okay, so obviously everyone's just being a little bit reticent this afternoon. So if you do have any questions about anything that we've covered this afternoon, or indeed you're interested in the taster sessions, then I'd obviously would love to hear from you. So if there are no more questions, I'm going to say bye for now. You will be getting access to a recording of this if you like it, which you're very happy to pass on to other people, and I will speak to you all very soon. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.